is going to invite you.
Hi everyone. We are starting our Zoom and we are going to have Dr. Betsy Greenleaf.
Recording in progress.
Okay.
My wife.
You have no requests. Let me add
right.
people.
All right. Now I just got eventually when I figure out how to do the
Okay.
input on the computer.
Okay. So I'm inviting Jenna and Dr. Betsy Greenleaf. Hopefully did you guys get the invitation?
Hi, Tina.
Hi. Okay, we have one person on. Good. And then Betsy, did you get it yet? The invitation?
All right. I don't know. I see you guys live, but
Okay. I have sent out an invitation to you to join our live. Hopefully that went through. It said that it's processing. Like I can't.
was the invitation come through as a?
It should
come through.
I think it should be on your Instagram live. Maybe if you tap into our Instagram live, you'll see a request to join, or like someone has requested that you join.
Sorry, everyone, bear with us. We're trying to figure out the technical difficulties.
Yeah, I will try inviting you again. Did that work?
It looks like so while Tina is trying to invite Dr. Greenleaf to join, I can give a little bit introduction. So for anyone who's new to our Instagram live, we're a million marker. We empower people to make educated decisions about their health so that they can better meet their wellness goals. That's including trying to conceive, reducing toxins. So, and then according to the National Institute of Health, about 1/4 of women, 25% of women have a pelvic floor disorder. So while there's like no clear link to pelvic disorders and infertility, it can lead to, painful sex, which makes conception like challenging in its own right. So today we have Dr. Betsy Greenleaf to join us. And Dr. Greenleaf is the first female board-certified urogynecologist. So there's a lot we can learn from her if we can figure out how to, let her join our Instagram live.
It said that your handle wasn't able to join us, so I'm canceling the invitation and trying again. I really hope this works.
Through my phone potentially, but I don't know. This is fun.
Worst case, we can ditch the Zoom. So everybody for background, we're just like trying to record on both Instagram Live and Zoom. So we kind of need two devices. Since last time we had a few crashes with Instagram Live, we lost all the content. So we're trying to use Zoom as a backup. Therefore, all the technical. Oh, here you are! Yay!
Yay!
So
Okay, it's working.
On my phone.
Fantastic. Okay.
And I'm on a Zoom on my phone. So that was like really crazy. So
okay, this is good. Awesome. I'm glad it worked.
So maybe I should get out of Zoom.
Okay, sure.
Let me see. Hopefully I don't lose it. Okay, I'm getting it.
All right. Okay.
On Zoom on the computer, but let's talk to people on Instagram.
Yes, no. This is good. This is good. I'm so glad we figured out.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us. Like we know you have like such an interesting story, and then so please tell us and the audience a little bit about your medical background.
Sure. So I'm Dr. Betsy Greenleaf. I'm the first board-certified female urogynecologist in the United States. And, you know, a lot of people are like, what's a urogynecologist? And even when I first was studying, my mom thought it was like a fancy gynecologist, like Euro Disney, like European. But urogynecologists have to deal with urology and gynecology. It's like a mix between the two specialties. So we have to deal with pelvic floor, pelvic health, and we tend to do a lot of pelvic pain, and that's where it kind of runs into like what you guys are doing. So it's a little bit more, we do either obstetrics or gynecology or urology training, then do advanced training in female pelvic medicine and reconstructive surgery. So yeah, so that's what I do.
Very impressive.
This is so impressive. But what is it about your medical experience that, you know, lead you to take on a more, you know, holistic approach with your patients?
You know, I found that, you know, when you go through traditional medicine training, and unfortunately and listen, hey, it's great, traditional medicine, it, you know, keeps a lot of us alive, but there's definitely a lack in knowledge because the American medical system is based on a triage system. It is actually based out of the military. And so the triage medical system is based on, if you have a symptom, let's give something to cover it up, instead of going and diving deeper and finding the cause. So a lot of patients, unfortunately, are just getting pills or treatments to cover up their symptoms, and then that can cause more symptoms. So they get more pills or more treatments or surgery or whatever, and that causes more symptoms, instead of actually trying to get down to like, well, what's causing the underlying problem, and let's try to fix that. And that's why I'm so excited to talk to you guys with your product and your testing, because you guys are getting down to the root cause of so many problems for a lot of people. So
yeah, definitely. There's a nutritionist who says that American healthcare is not healthcare, it's disease care, or it's a lot more like retroactive
yeah. I mean,
care,
it is, you know, we look at it all as like, it's just tools in our toolbox, but I really, in my training, or really more so in my career, was like, I don't want to just cover up symptoms. I want to try to fix people. You know, I want to get them back. Like, my goal is get you so healthy that you don't have to see me anymore.
Right. Yeah. A lot of it is within your own hands and control. You like do preventative work. So what got you inspired to study pelvic disorders in the beginning?
So I'm sorry, what was that?
What like inspired you to study pelvic disorders from the beginning?
You know, it's so funny. I don't know. I didn't go into medical school to become a gynecologist. And actually, there's a funny story is I was in residency and was sitting at lunch with a friend of mine who was a podiatrist. So she was a foot doctor. And I looked at her and I was like, ew, how do you look at nasty feet all day long? And she like looked up from her food, like almost choking on her food. And she's like, are you serious? And I was like, I didn't realize what I do. It's just like, as I went through medical school, I actually started out in general surgery because I really like the hands-on, but then I found out that, not to bash general surgeons, they're great, but I wanted more of a relationship with my patients. You know, as a person who was walking around after somebody had their appendix, and I'm like, so how do you feel after your appendix is gone? Like, how do you feel after your gallbladder was taken out? You know, like general surgeons, that's not like, you know.
I guess everyone's under anesthesia.
Yeah, so OBGYN and working in women's health really gave me that ability to develop relationships with my patients and then do all the surgery and medicine on top of things. So yeah,
definitely. And then so in terms of like studying pelvic disorders in specific, could you give us a little background about what inspired you there?
Yeah, so part of it was I had my own journey with pelvic pain issues and recurrent infections. So it was partly like, well, you know, doctor, heal thyself. So I was looking into ways to heal myself. And then also, you know, it came across with patients. And then I really got fascinated with the area of hormones and pelvic pain because of the problem where not many people were doing that in the area that I'm in New Jersey. And so it was just, it really came out of a necessity for my patients and trying to figure out how to help them.
Right. That's great that you're catering to this gap. And so we hear this word pelvic, it's like we take for granted, we understand it in passing, but can you break down the purpose of the pelvis for women in particular too?
Sure. So the word pelvic just is the region of the body. So it's right below the belly button. So it's any organs, nerves, skin, vessels below the belly button and above the thigh. So that incorporates your bladder, the urethra, the tube you pee through, the uterus, ovaries, vagina, vulva. For men, that's penis, testicles, and then also the bowels. So, and plus all the nerves, muscles, and connective tissue in that area.
Yeah.
So
Wow. A lot involved that we overlook.
Pelvic because it's just kind of easier, kind of covers that whole area.
Right.
And unfortunately, there was a study that just came out with the word vagina that 65% of women are uncomfortable saying that word.
Oh, wow.
And so one of my goals is if we can't talk about it, we can't help, and you can't get help. You can't. Doctors can't help and people can't heal. And up to 80% of women will have a pelvic health issue at some point in their lives.
Wow.
So,
yeah. Especially when you compare to the people who are uncomfortable with discussing it, especially when it's only a scientific word.
Yeah, exactly.
But what is, so why is a strong pelvis very beneficial for pregnancy?
So, I guess. And also just for all of us. So the way we're built is we have bones and muscles and skin and connective tissue that holds everything in. Except for in the pelvis, you have the hip girdle and the pubic bone that makes this big circular kind of protective bone structure around our pelvis. But then there's nothing open to gravity. So the only thing that's keeping our pelvic organs in place is the fact that we have muscles and ligaments holding things in. So not just, definitely for pregnancy, we tend to start getting damage to that tissue as from the weight of a pregnancy. But even women who have constipation and men, and people who have chronic coughing or bronchitis, you can damage that tissue. Or lifting heavy objects. We always tell people, make sure you're blowing out. And you see these big weightlifters blowing out as they're lifting because you're trying not to increase your pressure.
Very interesting.
Because you can damage the ligaments, and now things can droop and drop, and sometimes they're not going to fall out on the floor, but they could protrude to the point you're like, ooh, what is that? So
wow, very interesting.
Wow, so
piece of knowledge for everyone.
So all of these can be like part of the pelvic disorder, then pelvic floor disorder. So how do you define a pelvic floor disorder, and what are some main types of this kind of disorder?
Sure. So there's a bunch of them. The easiest ones to talk about would be the ones where the anatomy, the actual structures have now been damaged, the ligaments are drooping or dropping. So as women, tends to be mostly women who've had pregnancy or births, but doesn't have to be. You can actually get where the bladder starts to drop out of the vagina. It's really more so it's leaning on the vagina, and the vagina is made to indefinitely stretch. This is how we have babies. So that the uterus can drop down, the rectum can drop down all through the vagina. So those are anatomical issues. They can also add to incontinence, leaking if you cough, laugh, sneeze, or difficulty holding in the urine. The more complicated cases are your pelvic pain conditions, and pelvic pain conditions run a whole gamut from endometriosis, where the lining of the uterus gets out instead of sloughing off as a period every month, it's getting out into the abdomen and growing on other organs. You have like the spasmed pelvic floors, where the muscles of the pelvic floor kind of go into spasm. They're usually getting triggered by some other sort of pain condition, and they're tightening up to splint against that pain. And that can cause pain with intercourse. Sometimes people can't sit. They have constant pain. That's some of the issues. I'm just even thinking about just when it comes to you guys too, like specifically with the testing you guys do, I'm thinking also like endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome are some of the things that we see that are affected by hormones. So yeah, there's tons of different conditions. I could go on forever.
So what are some like symptoms, common symptoms that you may experience if you're, have any of these disorders? So then, it seems to be
So
pretty
one of the
complicated. So how do people spot it,
Yeah, so sometimes it is difficult. So sometimes, like, all right, so I'm thinking like right now, just some of the hormonal issues, and also that's related to the testing that you guys do, is like with polycystic ovarian syndrome. Because so with polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, and even a lot of hormonal conditions, I've seen a drastic rise in these conditions over probably the last 10 years. And one of my thoughts has been the issues with xenoestrogens or these endocrine disruptors, so that we have toxins in our environment that bind to our estrogen receptors at 20 times that of our natural hormones. And so this, and not just with women, I'm kind of going on a tangent from your question, but I was just so excited about what you guys do and how this relates to my field. Is that, I mean, it's not just for women. And when we're seeing a rise in men with prostate cancer, we're seeing a rise in men with breast cancer. And this is because of elevated estrogens. Even when we see the commercials on TV for men all the time, they're like, do you have low T, which is low testosterone? That can be a high estrogen state. And we know that all these toxins in our environment, whether it's coming from plastics or pesticides or insecticides, cleaners, cosmetics, that our body perceives this as estrogen. So the other connection with estrogen and a rise in pelvic pain conditions is, I always like call estrogen is like the Goldilocks hormone. Like too much, you can have pain conditions. Too little, you can have pain conditions. Estrogen has to be just right. So, so that we are seeing a rise in the pelvic pain conditions, something called interstitial cystitis, which is an inflammatory condition of the bladder. So some of these conditions sometimes don't show up right away. They may be like, for women, they might start experiencing problems with their cycle, and their cycle is off. They may then start to have like maybe issues with vaginal discomfort with sexual activity. They can have excess cramping when they get their periods, like more so. The bleeding may get really heavy. Some of the different pain conditions, they may have burning when they pee, or sensation that they have a bladder infection when they don't necessarily have one, or they're getting frequent bladder infections. So a lot of times these things kind of creep up, and then all of a sudden it's kind of like, it's like a cup that's spilling over, like they're good, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, now I'm having these problems. So,
Oh, wow. So I guess like for those of you who are interested in learning more about endometriosis, we actually just talked to the endometriosis dietitian, Cindy Dabrowska last week. So, be sure to check out our, Instagram feed for that. But, since while we're on this topic, there are some, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, so we're seeing a lot of these, what they're called high estrogen states, and that's because of all these environmental toxins triggering our body to think we're being exposed to estrogen. So, and then the problem too is that too much estrogen will also trigger other hormones. So we may start having issues with testosterone. So sometimes people may then start having excess body hair, or this is what we see a lot of times in polycystic ovarian syndrome, is they start having problems with acne and excess body hair, or even to hair loss. You can actually get hair loss because these hormones will convert back and forth with each other. So,
Yeah, when we trying to educate users or customers, we also let people know, your hormone actually works as a symphony in your body. So it's like you only need a tiny amount, and then they really have to sync. Otherwise, things will go out of whack, and imbalance will cause exactly like you said, they go back and forth. So you really want a balanced hormone.
And the other thing with hormones is it's not even just the hormones. I mean, we have the whole hormone cascade where, we look at cholesterol and people think, oh, cholesterol is bad. Well, we need cholesterol to make our hormones. But if you're under stress, now what, not only do you like affect your sex hormones, but they'll get diverted into your stress hormones. So you'll start making more cortisol and cortisone, and which makes you more makes you not heal, and now you're more susceptible to infections. And then that all these hormones are so interrelated, and then like you said, you add on those environmental toxins on top of it, which is a stress in itself. So
Oh, wow.
and this is, it's amazing to me. This is something that we don't learn in traditional medical school. It wasn't until I came across the information about these environmental toxins that I like looked at my own products in my house, and I was like, oh my gosh. And like, next thing you know, I'm like dumping out cleaners and shampoos and conditioners and trying to find ones that are healthier. So
Right.
Thank you for this. This is exactly, music to our ears, and that's
Yeah.
exactly the information we want to convey to the public, that people need to, vote with their dollars and then really take a look at their product that they're using, the food they're eating, so then they can reduce their toxin levels. So then, down the road.
And women always forget about their cosmetics.
Right.
Like, no, they forget to look at your cosmetics, which contain so many levels of different toxins.
Right.
That always, and I always found this interesting too, like the sex toy industry. Like a lot of the plastics that they use. I mean, they have now kind of jumped on board and like, hey, we're phthalate free, we're BPA free. But like for how, if you got some old toys lying around the house, check them out. Go get some ones that don't have.
Same with like the lubricants, condoms, like the feminine care products. Like it's filled with all these chemicals that come into contact with like very porous, sensitive skin.
Yeah. I think too, I mean, they talk about, we're seeing young girls kind of going into puberty younger and younger. And it's not just, I mean, part of it is not eating, the things we're eating, but it's also just being exposed to these hormones.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah, the vaginal health is like so important. But there's like so much like misinformation there, for vaginal health. What's the difference between pelvic floor disorder versus the pelvic inflammatory disease? Because I think a lot of people heard about pelvic inflammatory disease, but not so much about the disorder.
Yeah. And the pelvic inflammatory disease, typically by definition, is related more to an infection. That's usually what is happening, because as women, so this is the other thing is, people are like, why should I care about what I put in my vagina? Well, as women, we're an open system. And I was talking to somebody recently who was in the healthcare profession, not in gynecology, and they were like, what do you mean they were an open system? Well, you have the vagina is a tube that goes to the outside. So you got the vulva, which is the outer part. And then you have a tube, the vagina, that comes up into the uterus. So it goes through the cervix, which the cervix is just the opening of the uterus. So now you go into the uterus, that's an open cavity. Now attached to the uterus, you have the fallopian tubes, which are tubes. They're open. And on the very end, a lot of people misunderstand. They think the ovaries are kind of like stuck and attached to the fallopian tubes. They're not. The fallopian tubes are open to your abdominal cavity. So every month when you make an egg, when you're menstruating, the egg is just kind of being released, and the fallopian tubes have these things called fimbriae that kind of like wave, and they like kind of with suction, they kind of pull the egg into the tube, but they're open. So this is why we talk about like not douching, because if you do it under too much pressure, you could be washing fluid up into the abdominal cavity, and now your abdominal cavity is exposed to whatever you just kind of washed up there. This is why the connection with talc use and ovarian cancer, and that's a whole controversial topic, but the theory behind it is that we know talc particles are irritants, and then so the idea is that they get into the abdominal cavity and potentially get on the ovaries and cause an irritation, and then that irritation could potentially lead to cancer, because we know inflammation in general can add to risk of cancers. So
Yeah, according to the NIH, like those with pelvic inflammatory disease also have like 3 times more, like there are 3 more times likely to live with endometriosis, developing endometriosis. I guess it's a similar thing with inflammation. So is it just because inflammation, or there are also some other reasons?
So I think with a lot of times with endometriosis too, there's like this underlying inflammatory condition too. So I think it's more that the inflammation's going hand in hand with the issues with the endometriosis. And so a lot of times endometriosis, so the theory behind why that happens too is that since we're this open system, that the uterus every month when you have a period, it's supposed to be contracting and pushing out the sloughed off tissue that we don't need for a pregnancy. Well, in some people, they get what's called retrograde menstruation, where that blood and tissue is going back out through the fallopian tubes and is now getting into the abdominal cavity, and it doesn't have any place to grow. Those cells, which are endometrial cells, tend to attach itself to whatever organs or the abdominal cavity, and then they respond every month to hormone exposure. So every month where you would normally be building up this lining of the uterus and bleeding off, these cells in the abdominal cavity and growing on bowel or other organs is going to build up, and then they're going to bleed off into the abdominal cavity. And then the reason why this can be so painful is we know that blood is a big irritant to the tissue in the abdominal cavity. So that's why they have not just the issues with cramping that they may normally have with the period, but to have increased risk of pain during their periods because they're basically internally bleeding. And that's causing a lot of issues. And like I said, because it's so hormonal dependent too, you add like these toxins, which to the body look and bind more to your estrogen receptors than your regular estrogen. It's going to make your estrogen appear to be much higher. So
oh wow. Okay.
So it could really make the condition.
Complications with this. What are some treatments or ways that people can look after themselves and seek help if they're suffering any of these conditions?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is talk about it. So a lot of women, like I said, embarrassed about talking about it. There's no shame. These are, you know, doctors, we're used to hearing everything. There's nothing that you can say to me that's going to make me go, oh my God, you know, really, I have heard it all. There's nothing, you know, it's just a fact of life. It's body parts. We don't really care. But you really have to talk. You have to talk about it. You can't get help unless you start talking. And and a lot of women kind of forego self-care, and that's the problem. We see women tend to, and this is generalization, and I'm seeing like more empowerment with women, which is great, but you know, we see a lot of women who act as martyrs. They put everybody else before themselves, and they'll be like, oh, I'll deal with this later, or oh, this is just using the excuse, this is just a normal part of being a woman, that's not the answer. And if anyone ever tells you that, like, don't talk to that person anymore. They don't know what they're, you know, and because something is common, it doesn't mean that you have to suffer too, because there is help. And whether you bring it up to your family doctor, a nurse practitioner, somebody in the health field can help you, even if it's not their specialty, they can be like, oh, wait a minute, I know somebody who can help. You know, surprisingly, as much as like Dr. Google, sometimes I get annoyed with Dr. Google because people find things on there. At least they're searching and they're kind of finding, you know, things and helping them direct them. I do say, you know, find things, you know, things on Dr. Google do kind of take with a grain of salt, because you really don't want to use that as your sole source of health information. But if it helps you get one step closer to the help you need, and same thing with social media. I mean, I love the fact that, you know, when social media first came out, as doctors, we were being told by our organizations not to be on social media, that it was inappropriate, that not to be on there, not to be accessible to patients. And it is so funny because now you see such a big change in that, and I love it because we're getting out the information. We're you know, we're getting people help. But once again, don't get all your medical information and be like, okay, you know, that's the perfect answer. Definitely use it to try to take the steps to get to somebody that you can see in person. And the other thing I hear sometimes from patients too, there's this obligation just because you've gone to a doctor that you have to stay with them. And sometimes I'll hear patients come from elsewhere and they'll be like, oh, I've been with this doctor for years, but I don't like the care I'm getting, or I don't feel like I'm getting the answers that I need, but I don't want to leave them. Listen, You don't owe them anything. You got to
Yeah.
go to the people that you're comfortable with. I mean,
Yeah.
I know I'm good, but but at the same time, I'm not for everybody. You got to
Right.
pick a doctor that you mesh with, like personality with, or not this doctor, but like a healthcare practitioner,
Yeah.
because the better personality interaction you have between you and your healthcare practitioner, the more likely you're gonna want to follow what they're telling you, the more
Right.
likely you're going to have. I mean, because really healthcare is about communication, and you have to be
Yeah.
able to feel like you can talk to your healthcare practitioner. And if
Right.
you don't feel like you can talk to them, then it's about time to go find somebody else. Like,
Yeah.
you don't need to stay with that person. Go find
Yeah.
someone else. There's
That's a great
no
reminder
one.
to
It's like
everyone.
any relationship. There's somebody out there for everyone. Like, just go find the person that's right for you.
Right. No, definitely. I
That
guess.
is that is so awesome. Absolutely right. So you offer so many services, including getting second opinions. So could you tell us about your offerings?
Yeah, so one of the things I did about a year ago is, well, this is always gets a little touchy, is I actually left the insurance world because I had worked for 15 years in insurance and was getting frustrated over time
Mhm.
because I found that insurance is not meant necessarily to help you. They don't want to
Mhm.
necessarily see you get better, and they're
Yeah.
going to cover the things that are the least expensive. And
Yeah.
sometimes you have to jump through hoops and play this insurance game. Like, there's things where I knew that, like, this one treatment, which was like less invasive, would be the right answer. But
Yeah.
because of the way insurances work, I would have to prescribe someone medicine. They'd have to fail their medicine. I would have to prescribe them another medicine. They'd have to
Oh
fail
my.
that medicine. We'd have to
Mm.
try like all these other things before I
Oh
could get to the
man.
thing that I really wanted to do. And
Wow.
so, and unfortunately, in the American healthcare and the way insurance is, it becomes a factory system
Mhm.
where I've even had administrators in the hospital come to me and say, "You're spending too much time with patients,
Wow.
so we want you to see more patients, spend less time." And
Wow.
it became a factory. And I got to the point where I was like, I can't do that anymore. So I opened my
Yeah.
own practice. We don't participate in insurance, which sometimes that drives people away. But I always tell people, you got to look at it like this: your health is an investment.
Yeah.
It's not an expense. It's
Mhm.
not a cost. And
Yeah.
if you really want to get the care that you deserve, you need to have somebody that can spend time with you. So now, I mean, all my patients I spend at least an hour with
Mhm.
on the initial appointment, and really trying to get down to what's causing the problems. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm looking at not well, now I'm going to add your test because I'm so excited about your test.
Yay.
So, because I was like, there's nothing else on the market that looks at these environmental toxins. But
Right.
I look at, even though I'm doing pelvic health, because all of our systems are interconnected,
Yeah.
I'm looking at gut health. Because we
Yes.
know that the gut microbiome has a large effect on your whole system. I mean,
Yeah.
Hippocrates in 440 BC said, "Let food be thy medicine," and now
Mhm.
we're at 2021 and we've forgotten about that. So we have to look at like how foods affect our gut and affect other disease states. So
Right.
I'm testing gut health. We're looking at hormonal markers. We're
Mhm.
looking at food sensitivities to really
Yes.
get down to the underlying cause of disease. And now I'm going to be looking at toxins and
Yes.
their toxin exposures. So
Yes. We're very excited to
yeah. So I
make this
think that's an
connection.
awesome option, especially for people suffering from pain issues. And then, like you said, you talk to somebody about fertility. I mean, the rates of infertility have skyrocketed. The two main causes of infertility are toxins in the environment and microbiome issues.
Mhm.
So, from a microbiome standpoint, we're talking about microbiome is the bacteria that's in an environment on your body. So, our microbiome on our skin is different than what's in our mouth, different than our
Right.
gut, different than the vagina. And
Yeah.
new research is showing that the microbiome in the vagina has a feedback loop to the brain, so that if it's
Oh.
off, this is going to affect fertility and sex drive, because the body's going to sense that this is not an ideal time to reproduce. And so it can actually dampen the sex drive and also affect the hormones of fertility. So now we're looking at, a lot of women think like, oh, well, I need hormones for sex drive. No, it could be that the bacteria in the vagina is off, and we do microbiome testing in the office.
Oh, that's amazing.
So it's so, interconnected. And then, you add the effect of toxins on top of that. For fertility, those are probably the two main causes. So that can be easily changed.
Yeah. I think that's the most promising part, that like this is all like easy, simple, like diet, behavioral changes that you can make to make a world of a difference. You don't have to go through all the medication and procedures.
We also really love this holistic and comprehensive approach. At the same time, it's personalized, because everybody's toxin level or like a microbiome is different. So using this approach, then you really know what's going on with yourself.
Exactly. And exactly, you know what? And my argument too, when some people are like, well, I'm just going to go the traditional medicine route. Well, first of all, the traditional medicine route is not going to find this, because they don't even know to look. And so then what's going to happen, and I see it time and time again, these people get stuck in the medical system, and they're going the traditional medicine route, and they end up spending more money with co-pays and co-insurances and deductibles and all this, than if they just started with an integrative and functional medicine practitioner that could get to the root cause, get to it quickly, and get on living and having a healthy life. So
definitely.
This is amazing. So thank you so much for all this great information. So for anyone who's viewing, be sure to follow Dr. Betsy Greenfield at Dr. Betsy Greenleaf _
Yes.
So make sure you do that.
Unfortunately, that's my second account, because apparently I pissed off the Instagram gods over the summer and lost my first account.
Oh no, yes.
And I know it's not from saying the word vagina, because of there's a lot of people that say vagina on Instagram, but we theorize it's from saying the word you, because if you say you in a sentence relating to someone's race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or medical condition, it goes against their anti-bullying policies.
Oh, wow.
And we had a post that said, like, it was like, have you ever had an itchy vagina? Because our account got deleted. The account got deleted. So.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Help me rebuild my second account here.
Oh, that's so frustrating.
That's ridiculous.
Wow. Yeah.
But this one is easy enough. It's just an underscore. So Dr. Betsy Greenleaf _ Everybody remember that.
Yeah. Especially with this story, this anecdote, it'll be hard to forget.
Yeah, don't say you. Whatever you do, don't say you when it comes to anything, because
you're
bullied. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for leaving us on such a hopeful note of seeking out functional medicine help. That is always a great answer.
Yeah, I just think, I've been there myself with my own health issues and trying to find answers. And it wasn't until I found integrated functional medicine. And I always tell people, full health is a three-legged stool, a body, mind, spirit. That if all three legs are not equal, that stool is going to fall over. So it's not just, medicine. It's not just procedures. You have to work on the mental and spiritual aspect of your health. You got to get the sleep. You got to get enough fluid, not in plastic bottles. 75% of the population is chronically dehydrated. Don't drink out of plastic bottles, but you got to get more fluids. You got to do the basics.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Really.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Anytime. I had a great time. Let me know if you ever need me back.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Betsy.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.